Most of us grow up hearing that death is the end, that once your heart stops, it's over. You either go to heaven if you were good, or hell if you were bad. That's the story many of us have been told. Death is supposed to be the final destination. Peaceful if you're lucky, terrifying if you're not. But what if that's not the truth? What if everything we've believed about death is wrong, not just a little off, but completely flipped? What if death isn't the end at all, but a shift, a transition to something else, something active, alive, and full of purpose? That's exactly what Edgar Cayce, a man known as the Sleeping Prophet, believed. Cayce was an ordinary man from Kentucky. No religious robes, no big claims, just a quiet voice and a strange gift. When he lay down and entered a trance, he would speak of things that shocked those who listened. One of the most powerful messages he shared was about what happens after we die. According to Cayce, death isn't the full stop we think it is. It's a comma, a pause before the next sentence of the soul's journey. In his view, the soul doesn't just drift off into an eternal nap. It continues. It grows. It learns. And sometimes, it even comes back to help those still living. Cayce described a place called the astral plane. It's not heaven with fluffy clouds or hell with fire and suffering. It's something different. A world of energy and reflection. A space where the soul goes after the body dies, not to be judged or punished, but to understand. There, the soul reviews the life it just lived, not from a place of guilt or reward, but from truth. Pure, honest truth. Imagine being able to feel how your actions affected other people, not because someone told you it was right or wrong, but because you actually experience it from their side. You feel their joy if you help them, their pain if you hurt them. You don't just remember it, you live it again. Not as a punishment, but as a lesson. This life review isn't like a courtroom. There's no angry God pointing fingers. No fiery pits waiting below. There's just you, your choices, and the full emotional truth of the life you lived. According to Cayce, this moment of reflection helps your soul grow. It gives you the chance to really see yourself without excuses, without masks. The version of you that you show to the world fades away, and what remains is who you truly are. For some, that's beautiful. For others, it's hard to face. But it's always real. Not every soul moves through this stage at the same pace. Some people pass peacefully, ready to move forward. Others get stuck. They may not even realize they've died. They feel tied to the life they left behind, maybe because of regret, fear, or a deep attachment to someone or something. Cayce called these souls earthbound. They're not being punished. They're simply holding on, unable or unwilling to let go. These souls stay close to the physical world, and sometimes they even try to reach out, not to scare us, but to guide us, or to finish something they couldn't when they were alive. This astral plane, Cayce said, is not far away. It's not some distant, unreachable realm. It's all around us, just invisible to our usual senses. It's like a radio frequency. We don't hear it because we're not tuned in, but it's there, always. And some people, in quiet moments or dreams, may actually brush up against it without realizing. That idea might sound strange, but it also brings comfort. It means that those we've lost might not be as far away as we think. They could still be near us, watching, supporting, whispering to us in ways we don't fully understand. One of Cayce's most interesting ideas was that we don't go through this journey alone. He said we travel in soul groups, clusters of souls who reincarnate together across many lifetimes. These souls aren't always recognizable in each life. In one, someone could be your sibling. In another, your friend, your child, even a stranger who changes your path. The point isn't who they are on the outside. it's the connection that exists deep within. In the astral realm, we reconnect with these souls, sometimes to heal, sometimes to help each other grow, sometimes just to rest together before returning to Earth in new forms with new lessons. According to Cayce, reincarnation is not a punishment or a trap. It's part of our spiritual education. Life on Earth, with all its struggles and joys, is a classroom. And when we die, we don't graduate and leave forever. We review the lesson, we heal, and if needed, we come back to try again. Each life builds on the last, and every experience adds to our soul's evolution. There's no rush, no deadline, just the steady movement toward greater awareness, compassion, and understanding. Some souls, Cayce said, choose to come back quickly. Others rest longer, reflecting more deeply. Some may stay in the astral realm for a very long time, especially if they need to heal or process difficult experiences. But the key idea is this: nothing is forced. Every step is chosen. Free will doesn't die with the body. It continues on. You decide when you're ready. You decide what to learn next. This view of the afterlife is very different from what most religions teach. It's not about reward or punishment. It's not about fear. It's about growth, about becoming more than we were. And that changes everything. Because if life doesn't end at death, if our choices echo beyond this world, then how we live right now becomes even more important. Every word we speak, every action we take, every connection we make matters. And here's where Cayce's message gets really powerful. He said that some of the dead are still influencing the living, not as ghosts or scary spirits, but as guides, protectors, and inspirations. Ever had an idea pop into your mind out of nowhere? Ever felt comforted for no reason in a hard moment? According to Cayce, those could be whispers from the other side. The astral plane isn't just a waiting room. It's a place of intention, communication, and love. But there's another side to this too. Some souls get stuck because they're afraid to move on. Maybe they can't forgive themselves. Maybe they're still clinging to pain or anger. These earthbound souls don't need to be feared. They need compassion. And sometimes, Cayce said, they can be helped. A kind word, a prayer, or even just awareness of their presence can make a difference. This whole view of death doesn't just rewrite what we think happens after we die. It transforms how we live while we're still here. If there's no final judgment, only self-reflection, then we're not living to avoid punishment. We're living to understand, to become better, to align more deeply with who we truly are. The version of ourselves that exists beyond ego, beyond fear. And that means we always have a chance to change. Not just in this life, but in every life that follows. No matter how many mistakes we've made, no matter how lost we feel, the journey isn't over. The soul never stops growing. That's what makes this idea so hopeful. Death isn't something to dread. It's something to learn from. If this is true, if Cayce's thousands of trance readings were even partly right, then the story we've been told about death has been far too small. Death isn't a wall. It's a door. And what's on the other side isn't punishment or reward. It's reflection, healing, and the next step on a very long and beautiful journey. And maybe that's why this version of the afterlife hasn't been widely taught. Because people who don't fear death, people who believe their soul continues on, are harder to control. They live with purpose. They ask questions. They grow. They seek truth, not just comfort. So here's the question. If you knew you'd see your life again through the eyes of everyone you touched, would you live differently? Because according to Edgar Cayce, that moment is coming, not as punishment, but as a gift. A chance to really see, to really feel, and to really understand. And once you do, you'll have the freedom to keep moving forward, to rise, to return, or maybe to help others from the space in between. The dead aren't gone. They're just transformed, and they might be closer than you think. Maybe life is trying to tell us something. Maybe it's not just random events or comforting thoughts. Maybe everything continues. Maybe our lives aren't just one-shot accidents, but ongoing stories, parts of something much bigger. If that's true, then the people we've loved and lost aren't really gone. They're still here in their own way, watching, helping, growing. And if they're still with us, then we were never truly alone. Not in our darkest moments. Not even in death. A lot of us have been told that the afterlife is some quiet place, like floating in peace, resting forever. But what if that idea is too small? Edgar Cayce, a famous mystic, said the soul doesn't just sit still after death. It keeps working, learning, and growing. Death isn't the end, it's just a change. The soul doesn't go to sleep. It keeps moving forward with even more freedom and purpose. According to Cayce, souls stay active after they leave their bodies. Some might come back for a short time, maybe in a dream, or as a sudden insight, or in those moments where you feel someone watching over you, not with fear, but with peace. Others work quietly behind the scenes. They spark ideas. They calm your fear. They give you strength when you feel like falling apart. And no, it's not all in your head. It's real. It's intentional. Many of these souls continue the same kind of work they did while alive. If someone lived their life helping others, teaching, healing, comforting, then that mission doesn't stop after they pass away. In fact, it gets stronger. Without the physical body getting in the way, their energy can stretch even further. Cayce described networks of souls, like spiritual teams or councils, working together to guide the world, not as controllers, but as helpers. They don't force anything. They nudge. They stabilize. They support us in quiet, powerful ways. When the world is in crisis or changing fast, this invisible help becomes even more active. These souls don't perform flashy miracles. They work through inspiration and intuition. They plant new thoughts. They give people courage when they're close to breaking. They guide from behind the scenes, gently helping humanity stay on course. Some souls also use the time between lives to prepare for what's next. They study. They reflect. They learn what worked and what didn't. They get ready for another life, not because they're forced to, but because they choose to. Earth, Cayce said, is like a school, and many souls want to come back to keep learning, to grow, or to help others along the way. This brings us to reincarnation. For many people, the word feels heavy. Some think it means you're stuck, like a punishment, forced to live again and again. But Cayce turned that idea upside down. Reincarnation isn't a curse, it's a choice. You come back because you want to grow, because there's more to experience, more to understand. Your soul picks each life like a student picking classes, each one designed for a specific kind of growth. Sometimes that means learning compassion by going through pain. Sometimes it means reclaiming a gift you didn't fully use before. And other times it means helping someone else through a challenge you've already faced. Nothing is random. Each life has a reason. What about karma? It's often misunderstood. People think karma is some kind of cosmic punishment, but Cayce didn't see it that way. To him, karma was just cause and effect. When you hurt someone, you may need to understand what that pain feels like, not to be punished, but to learn empathy. Karma isn't about getting even. It's about growing wiser and more loving through experience. And here's the surprising part. You don't have to keep reincarnating. It's not required. You have free will, even after death. If your soul has learned enough and grown enough, you can move on to other places, other dimensions. But many souls choose to return, not for themselves, but to help others. These are often the ones who live tough lives, not because they're being punished, but because they came here to hold the light, to show the way, to wake others up. And yes, even these strong souls sometimes forget who they are, until something shakes them awake, a deep dream, a personal loss, a moment that feels bigger than life. Suddenly, something clicks. I've done this before. I chose this. That moment of remembering changes everything. Coming back again and again isn't a sign of being trapped. It's a sign of bravery. It means your soul is committed to becoming more and more whole. And when you've learned everything Earth can teach, you don't stop. You rise. Not to escape, but to serve in bigger ways. Beyond Earth, there are higher realms, realms of clarity, love, and deep connection. In those places, souls no longer ask, "What's in it for me?" They ask, "How can I help?" There's no ego, no fear, no greed. Souls in those realms live in harmony, create with their thoughts, and communicate through pure understanding. They don't manipulate. They support. They don't dominate. They guide. And they're still learning too. Growth never stops. These souls help younger ones transition. They assist with big shifts happening on Earth. Some even help create new realities entirely. Cayce didn't describe these realms as fantasies. To him, they were the next natural step for a soul that had grown up. The most beautiful part? These evolved souls were once like us. They doubted. They struggled. They searched. That means we're on the same path. They're not above us. They're just further along. When we choose love, honesty, and purpose, we start to meet them where they are. That's when their guidance shows up, not with lightning bolts, but in quiet moments that feel deeply right, like wisdom rising from within. Cayce warned against worshiping any spiritual being. True spiritual growth isn't about power or status. It's about remembering who you really are. The more you remember, the more naturally you want to serve, not out of duty, but because it feels like home. We're not trying to escape Earth. We're here to learn, to love, to help. And once we get the lesson, we move on, not to rest forever, but to serve in even greater ways. Earth is one classroom. There are many more, but the lessons are always rooted in the same truth. Know yourself. Love others. Help however you can. And when you start living like that, you won't need to chase higher realms. You'll start to feel them around you. They'll meet you halfway. You'll realize you were never alone, never off track. Every step you've taken, every choice, every fall, every rise, it all mattered. It all led you here. You chose to be here. Not by accident, not by force, because deep down, your soul knew you could handle this. You had something to give, something to learn, and something to remember. And when you remember that, really remember it, something shifts. Life stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like a mission. A sacred one. A shared one. You're not lost. You're in the middle of becoming. What if everything Edgar Cayce said about life after death is actually true? What if souls keep growing, helping others, coming back to Earth, and guiding from higher places? Then why doesn't everyone know about it? Why don't schools teach it? Why don't churches mention it? Why does it feel like you only stumble upon this kind of truth by accident, like finding a secret message behind a painting that's been hanging in your home forever? The answer is simple, but unsettling. Maybe you were never really supposed to know. At least, not in the world the way it's been set up. Cayce's insights don't just add something new, They break down the very systems that run our world. Religion, politics, schools, and our culture of constant buying and needing, they all rely on one big idea, that death is the end. And fear is what keeps people in line. If death is the end, life becomes a race. You only get one shot, so you'd better do everything right. You need to be good, follow the rules, earn your reward, and avoid punishment. You must be afraid because fear makes people easy to manage. Fear makes people predictable. And when people are predictable, they're easier to control. But what if that's not true? What if death isn't the finish line, but just a doorway? What if your soul keeps moving, learning, and evolving? What if you've lived before and will live again? What if you're here not to be perfect, but to grow? When you truly take that in, everything shifts. Suddenly, fear starts to lose its power. You stop living like you're on a timer. You stop chasing approval or fitting into someone else's version of success. You start to think for yourself. And people who think for themselves, they're hard to manipulate. They're hard to scare. They're hard to sell to. That's why Cayce's work isn't widely known. It doesn't fit into neat boxes. He wasn't trying to build a religion. He wasn't telling people what to believe. He was just sharing what he saw, again and again, in thousands of readings. People asked him about love, health, pain, purpose, and loss. And over, his answers pointed to the same truth. The soul never dies. What you do matters. And the world you see is only a small part of something much bigger. But this kind of truth doesn't sell products. It doesn't get taught in schools or preached from pulpits because it doesn't keep people afraid or chasing approval. Instead, the world distracts you with other messages. Get rich. Be beautiful. Be powerful. Win. Achieve. From the moment you're born, you're told what matters, and none of it has anything to do with your soul. Behind it all is a quiet voice saying, "This is your only life. Don't screw it up." And what does that do to you? It makes you anxious. It makes you feel small. It makes you chase things that don't feed your soul. And when you're always afraid you'll mess everything up, you become easy to control. But when you remember, even just a little, that this isn't all there is, something changes inside you. You start to wake up. You begin to ask new questions. You start living differently. And that's powerful. This isn't dangerous knowledge, it's freeing. It breaks the idea that only certain people or places can connect with the divine. Cayce's readings say you already have that connection. You don't need to earn it. You don't need someone else to give it to you. You're already plugged into something higher. Once you really feel that, it changes how you see yourself. You stop identifying as just a body or a job or a role. You start seeing yourself as a soul, a piece of consciousness, full of memory and purpose, here for just a moment to learn and grow. You came here to remember, to wake up. And once you do, you can't go back to sleep. That's why this truth stays hidden. Not because it's weak, but because it's strong. Because once you know it, you stop playing by the old rules. And here you are, reading this. You're already starting to remember. And that's the beginning of something big. When you accept that death is not the end, but just a step in a longer journey, the pressure of this life begins to fade. You stop worrying so much about fame, money, or status. You start caring more about peace, growth, and truth. You begin to live on purpose. If your soul continues after death, then what you do now really does matter. The pain you heal, the love you give, the lessons you learn, they don't just vanish. They echo into what comes next. Every action becomes part of your soul's journey. It's not about surviving life. It's about shaping it. You're not a victim of random events. You're a participant in a conscious evolution. That doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means it becomes sacred. When someone you love dies, they're not gone. They've changed forms. They're still growing, still learning, just on another level. They're not watching from far away. In many cases, they're right beside you, just out of view. And when you know that, your grief starts to shift. You stop needing closure and start finding connection. It also changes how you deal with your own pain. The heartbreak, the trauma, the breakdowns, they're not punishments. They're part of your soul's growth. Not in a just be positive way, but in a real, grounded way. You start asking, not, why is this happening to me? But, what is this teaching me? And that question, that tiny shift, is the beginning of real wisdom. You also begin to see that your life isn't an accident. You didn't just randomly end up here. Your soul chose this life, this body, this time, this family, not for comfort, but for expansion. You came here to learn, to grow, to help others, to love more deeply than ever before. And if you felt like you don't belong, like Earth has never quite felt like home, that's probably because your soul remembers something else. It remembers that this isn't your first life. And that memory, that homesickness, it matters. It means you're waking up. Because once you start to remember, the illusion begins to fall apart. You stop chasing empty goals. You stop following rules that never felt right to begin with. You start living from your truth. You begin to ask, what really matters to me? What do I believe in? What would I do if I wasn't afraid? Cayce's work isn't just about death. It's about life. Real life. The kind you live when you're not asleep or scared. It's about choosing to be aware, choosing to be honest, choosing to live with meaning. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. And if you've read this far, you've already begun. You've already felt something inside you saying, yes, this feels true. You're not just here to get by. You're here to wake up. This is the truth most people spend their whole lives avoiding, not the idea of death, but what death really means. Cayce didn't say the soul ends. He said it expands. He didn't talk about heaven or hell as final stops. He spoke of layers, stages, evolution. So maybe we've been asking the wrong question. Instead of, what happens when I die? Maybe we should be asking, how should I live right now? Because how you live today shapes what comes next, not just after death, but tomorrow and the next day and every breath you still have. This truth isn't here to scare you. It's here to set you free. So live like your choices matter, because they do. Heal the pain you've been carrying, because it will follow you until you do. And love, deeply and without holding back, because love is the one thing you get to take with you. You didn't come here to fit in. You came here to remember who you really are.